Hello, hello, Edson Oliveira here. This is the October edition of the TADUG meetup. And today we have a guest, and again, a bunch of, not only the guests, of course, but we have a bunch of usual faces. I'm gonna go through the list quickly here. Daniel Valadas, David Poindexter, Gary
Hi.
what? Oh, Gary,
Okay.
local here, Gary. Isn't it Toronto based, Gary?
It's me.
Awesome, Gary.
Okay. Sorry,
Good to
one
hear
sec.
from you. Good to have you back.
Yeah.
Of course, we have Kelly Ford. He is the main presenter, but I'm gonna get there in a second. Mark Balzin. Mark, I always think that I'm messing around with your last name. You should shoot me an email. Mike Smeltzer, Paul Scarlett. Good to have you here, Paul, and Steve Karpik. Very
Good
good to have
evening.
you here as well, Steve. Good to see you. Okay, okay. So as you can see, as you can hear, I'll be coughing quite a bit here. I've been saying that for the past 2 weeks that I've been under the weather, and the weather doesn't want to come no over me, to leave me. So again, it's been 2 weeks. Next tomorrow will be my 2 weeks anniversary of this cold, but I'll be coughing a little bit and I'll be muting my mic a little bit here and there. So I'll do the best I can here. So just going through the main agenda, we're gonna go through some acknowledgements, announcements, group time, the main presentation, of course. That's the reason why you guys are here, and we do a wrap up. Okay. Now, acknowledgements first. So let's talk a little bit about our sponsors. So, Daniel for less. Thank you very much, Jesse, for renewing your sponsorship for the user group. I mean, much appreciated. You should show up at some point. Easy and Solutions as well to help for having helped us putting together the website. Hoffling Software from Andrew Hoffling. Andrew, you should be joining us because you are just across the pond. This is very close to you. We are just neighbors across a big lake. I mean, you should be showing up. Okay, so I'm calling you out here. Okay, so again, thank you very much for our sponsors. In terms of announcements, I try to keep this very brief because if you want to get a real in-depth scoop of what is going on with the DNN space, you have the meetup of the Soul Fright meetup. They go into a lot of news there. I do that as well on the monthly news, so I have done that just a few days ago. So again, today I just want to keep it simple. In terms of announcements, DNN2 922 is out. I think it's been out. I think it was last Friday. By the way, today is October the 3rd. So I think that DNN22 has been out since Friday, Monday. I mean, someone can correct me if you want, but it's not a big deal. I mean, I know it's just in the last few days that DNN has 22 has been out. The big deal with DNN 22, what is it? It's because it's the very first one that has been fully done by the community and having DNN Corp as yet another participant. Or no, is that what is that, David? Is that EWS? I mean, what is the company name? Is that
ESW.
ESW. So of course with ESW as well, but again, very much driven by, actually 100% driven by the community. There are 2 blog posts about the release, and you should definitely check that one out. And so yes, it took a little bit more time from the release candidate to the final release, but it's because a few kinks in the process were being sorted out. And so again, now it's fully done and it seems to be a success. So again, looking forward to keep that flow going. DNN 9.3 has been kind of announced that will be out around mid-November, with the final version coming in beginning of mid-December as well. So release candidate most likely mid-November. and I have noted down a few things that have been that will get addressed in that. Not my notes here, but anyway, it's more about adjustments, fixes to the persona bar, and there are a few other things there. Yeah, I don't recall on top of my head. My notes are not very up to date. Sorry about that. Yeah. Anyway, that's really what I wanted to mention in terms of announcements here. So, in terms of new members, I usually like to have a look at the page, on Meetup and see if anybody else has joined us. And yes, we have two new people that joined the club here. We have Cherie from Toronto, and we have also, let's see, Heather from Cary, North Carolina. Is Cary close to you, David?
Yeah, she usually joins our meetups online. Not coming physically, but has joined us online several occasions.
Awesome. Okay, good. So, and again, let me see if there's anybody else that came to the meetup here. Oh, we have, again, the usual suspects, and I went through the list quickly here. Okay, anybody you want to mention about what you have been doing with DNN lately? I mean, feel free. Steve, do you want to mention anything? Steve, Gary, Paul, anybody who wants to raise your hand and say, hey, this is what I've been doing lately with DNN?
Well, there's a couple bug fixes, new releases in the core modules, namely Ernst Peter is working a lot on the events module. A new release should be coming very soon with a lot of bug fixes. And I just published a new release of, which one was it?
Links, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm just, the links, no? What is it that I worked on recently? I don't remember now. But anyway, there's moving there, and we're still meeting every 2 weeks, and there's good progress.
Let me ask you this, Daniel. At this point in time, all the modules, the core modules, they are compatible with the latest DNN. Are they?
All the popular ones. There's a couple exceptions. Some of them were never even moved from Codeplex. I think about the gallery. I think about there's like 4 or 5 of them that were really the least popular ones. Another good news: the forums module has now a maintainer, and it has been tested to work with DNN 9.2. So we can now officially say that all the popular ones are fine.
So that's the core forum modules, not the active forum, correct?
Yeah, the core forum modules that I'm talking about. Active forums has been compatible with 9.2 since a couple months, but it has been maintained outside of the DNN community. So it's one more option that's there. But we wanted to have something within the DNN community that a lot of people can take over, and it's not owned by a specific individual. So there was a lot of talks if we should grab active forums, because that was acquired by DNN, or if we should maintain forums. And now we have a maintainer, and we're going with the DNN core forums so far.
Awesome. Very good. Okay. And updates, we have gone through some of the updates. I mean, I'm not gonna... And I'm just gonna do the same call out, the same call to action here that I have done last time. If you have questions...
Yeah, I forgot to name and...
Awesome. Thank you for that. So, in terms of resources, if you have a problem with DNN, if you have tried maybe the forums and no one was able to, to help out the way you would hope for, every Friday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. we get together, and when I say we, I mean people like Daniel like Mike Smeltzer, David. I think that you have been there already quite a lot. I think it's what I've called Open Friday, DNN Open Friday, which runs every Friday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you have questions, if you have anything about DNN that you want to get to know a little bit more, and you want to have someone there, right there, that you can interact with, you can ask questions, you can get quick replies, and hopefully point you in the right direction, or even fix the problem for you, come and join us at Open Friday. You can do that by going to deskpaul.com/open. I will post the link right here in the video. Okay, so yeah, and I'll keep pushing that forward. Initially, it was supposed to be just 4 weeks, just to experiment, but I see that people are using it, people are liking it, people are enjoying, people are getting connected to people there, which is also what is the community is all about. So I'll keep pushing as far as I can. So that's what I would like to share in terms of resources. Okay, so you're not here because of me, you're here because of the main presentation. And as the presenter, we have today Kelly Ford on being prompt or learning to love command line. Now, let me get the proper intro for him. Kelly has been working with DNN since version 1. Like any good, lazy programmer, Kelly has always wanted to do things faster and more efficiently. That motivated him to create Xmods and later Xmod Pro for creating applications in DNN without programming and all the boilerplate codes that entails. Fortunately, other people thought that it was pretty and cool, and the resulting sales have kept him awash in Mountain Dew since 2004. Tiring of constant clicking on and page loads involved in managing his websites, Kelly had another inspired idea. Why not create a command line for DNN? And Prompt was born. Kelly donated the code to DNN platform in 2017, and it was officially integrated in 2018 as part of DNN 9.2. So that's what we'll be hearing about here. So welcome to the group. Kelly, thank you for making the time. Thank you for taking the time. And
Thanks,
I will be giving you control over the presentation.
Okay.
Let me see here. Okay. Kelly. And now I finally can cough as much as I want. Please take it over, Kelly.
Okay. Well, before I start, can I just say, I just want you to feel at home, Anderson. All right. So thanks for having me. It's really it's a pleasure to be here. I have talked about prompt quite a bit over the last year and a half. This has been a long running project getting it into DNN. So you may have, if you've watched some of the other presentations I've done, you might have seen some of this stuff before, but we're going to go through a live and pretty in-depth demo, which hopefully will be new even if you've seen some of the presentations before. So with that said, oh, by the way, do you like my my Halloween shirt? I think designers will like that. That's my font awesome skull for Halloween. So I thought I'd just get into the spirit here today. Okay, so the presentation today is on being prompt, or learning to love the command line. Many of us have not been fans of the command line, but I became very intrigued by it when I finally got a Mac many years ago and started to learn the ins and outs of Linux on which it's based. First of all, a little bit about me. That's me. I'm really small. I can actually fit inside of a camera. But I have been a developer since .NET Nuke version 1, about 1.08 actually, and have been working with it ever since. I also do cloud consulting, solutions architect, certified at AWS. Of course, I've been designing, developing websites on DNN for many, many, many years. I host DNN websites, and as Anderson mentioned earlier, I'm lazy, but in a good programmery type of way, in which I want to do things as fast and as quickly as possible. Professionally, I am the founder and head know-it-all at knowbetter.com, which is essentially the parent organization for DNN Dev. So I'm the founder and webmaster there, and DNN Dev produces Xmod Pro, which you may have heard of. And I'm also, more recently, the Chief Technical Officer at PartsBeast, which is an online used car parts trading marketplace. So let's get into it. First of all, I wanted to get a little bit of the history as to how Prompt evolved, how it came to be, because it is fairly unique among CMSs and what we've done. So I wanted to give it a little bit of the history. First of all, back in 2003, we had DNN looking something like this. It's hideous by today's standards, but try not to judge it too much, because look, we had 9,000 registrations, and that was a big deal at that time. So fast forward, what is it, 15 years later? Yeah, my math is escaping me there, but we're now the leading .NET CMS. And that's great. Things have evolved and things look better also. Also, editors have evolved. Back in 2003, we were using Visual Studio, and it was early days. We were doing drag and drop of our buttons onto web pages, and it was pretty hideous as well. But that was great at the time. Now, in 2018, we have something like Visual Studio Code, which is so much better. Nothing visual about it anymore. But I don't know why they still call it Visual Studio Code, but it's code-centric. It's fast, it's efficient, and it runs cross-platform. Front-end tooling, well, it exists now where it didn't before. We used to do JavaScript by hand, and of course we had to deal with JavaScript eccentricities between the different browser platforms. And so we're happy that front-end tooling exists. We have all sorts of them these days. They just keep popping up over and over again. And oh, look, there's another one. Even .NET has changed over this period of time. We have things like NuGet, which is kind of an equivalent to, or the .NET equivalent to NPM if you're interested in Node. We've got PowerShell, which is a really super kind of command line on steroids. .NET has gone cross-platform with .NET Core, and of course Windows has gotten Bash and embedded Linux. So times they are changing. Dogs are sleeping with cats. It is absolute mayhem anymore. One thing is certain though, the command line really is cool again. Everybody's using it. All the cool kids are using it. But really, why is the command line, such an old technology, cool? I posit that GUIs just make us grumpy. And there are many reasons for that. Mainly, bad GUIs make us grumpy. If you have lots of options, then a GUI isn't necessarily the best option. There are just way too many things to see on a screen, and it makes it very difficult for a user to focus on that. Building it is also problematic. It's fragile. Any kind of errant CSS or JavaScript is going to break it. If you want to actually change things, modify things, move things around, add new stuff, it is complicated. There's just a ton of code you have to deal with in order to keep these GUIs functional and up to date. And on the web, you know, they're still slow. The reason mainly is because you have to click around on all those options, and it's just too much to deal with. Well, as you all know, if you follow DNN, DNN Corp had already made some strides in this area with the persona bar. Much maligned, but often I think eventually it'll be much loved. Persona bar is getting a lot of improvements to it. And so with that persona bar, they also tried to reduce a lot of the complexity and the speed with which the front end, the GUI, operated. And they did that with Ajax. So the persona bar pages are pretty snappy these days. They've reduced a lot of the options, or some of the options, I should say. So there's not as much visual clutter, but as you can see, there's still quite a bit going on, and people start to complain that, well, I can't find what I used to be able to find, and that becomes problematic as well. But again, these GUI improvements, as I've been mentioning, they only take you so far. They're still slow because if you have a lot of stuff, there's a lot of clicking that has to go on just to get to different parts. So you have to click on this tab and then this option button to really reveal these options that you can then click on. And that's just to complete one task. So it's really slow and clunky. And it can be very confusing just visually seeing all those options. So someone who doesn't really know what they're doing, what they're after, if they're presented with a huge page with tons of options, then that becomes visual clutter for them. It makes it harder for them to use the software, and it decreases the user experience fairly significantly. So what I posited back in really would have been 2016 was that it was time that DNN goes old school. Not old school like that, more like old school like that. So enter a prompt, and that is the command line for DNN. For those who are not familiar enough with the command line, let me give you kind of the Wikipedia definition of this, because everybody believes that if it's on Wikipedia. A command line, or a CLI, is used whenever a large vocabulary of commands or queries coupled with a wide or arbitrary range of options can be entered more rapidly as text than with a pure GUI, or graphical user interface. That is a lot of words. What I just prefer to say is that a command line is a way to do things very fast without a lot of visual clutter. So command lines are awesome, in my opinion. They're also intimidating. So what I tried to do with prompt was to bring the awesome part of it to bear as part of DNN, but also make it as friendly as possible to use. We want as many people who are managing a DNN website to be able to use prompt efficiently rather than having to click around all over the place. So in that effort, there are a couple of three design principles I really had behind the development of prompt. First one is that obviously it should feel and operate just like a command line interface, because that is the whole point of prompt. We want to get the benefits and the speed of a command line interface without all the overhead of this GUI. But at the same time, we want to realize that we're operating within an HTML environment. So while it might look like a CLI, a classic CLI, we really have all of the benefits of HTML at our disposal. And so if we judiciously use little bits and pieces of HTML, like hyperlinks, which we'll see a little bit later, then I think we can bring a lot more friendliness to the command line interface that is typically absent in a standard operating system-based command line interface. So the second design principle then is to reduce some of this intimidation. And as you'll see in the demonstration, hopefully we've gone a long way towards that through inline help, through little features that help to learn the command line as you use it without having to be inundated with just a ton of options and flags and commands that you may not know what they are yet. And finally, because once you start using a command line, when you realize the benefit is that you can do things so much faster just by typing rather than loading pages and clicking on things. And that's true whether you're talking about a web page or you're talking about an application. Command line is almost always faster for most operations. Unless, of course, maybe you're editing a photo or a video, but you know what I mean. So we want to minimize our keystrokes as much as possible. Onwards and upwards, it is time for the demo. So let me get switched over here. Alrighty, so this is DNN 9.21. I know 9.22 is, let me make sure this is being shown. Yes, you guys can see my screen again. Okay, I assume. So this is DNN 9.21, but prompt was officially launched in DNN 9.20. In reality, when I built prompt originally, there wasn't a persona bar. It was just built for DNN 7 and later, actually. So I had to build it as a skin object. that you could put into a skin, and that allowed you to pop up this command window whenever you wanted to. But with the help of Peter Donker, he helped me to integrate this for DNN 9.2 into the persona bar, and that is where it lives today. So it is only available to super users or hosts once you are logged in as such, and I'm not sure if I'm still logged in here or not. Let's just check that out. Yep, I'm still there. Okay, good. So you will find prompt on the settings menu all the way over here in the second column called prompt. So click on that and it will pop open prompt for you. Hopefully we start off with something that is fairly friendly. If you don't know what you're looking at, just type in help. So why don't we go ahead and do that? And it gives you a list of help. So I'm going to scroll up. You can see there are a lot of commands that you can execute with prompt. But I'll give you, it breaks them out into certain categories, like just the general commands, hosting-related commands, commands related to the module, pages, portals, things related to the recycle bin, roles, the scheduler, and user commands. This is what we have. This is kind of a, I would say, a 1.0 in terms of feature set for prompt. So as you can see, it is doesn't look like your typical command line interface, which is usually just, gray text or green text, possibly a little color here and there. One thing you won't see in a command line are links like this, or like this over here, which I think David Poindexter cleared up for us, just a styling issue. Yep. Good. So is that in 9.2.2?
It is indeed. Yep.
Okay, cool. So there's a reason that we have these links. First of all, I don't want to talk about that yet. What I want to point you to is that when you do help, it will give you a nice, short, fairly brief description of what each of these commands does. So you can just scroll through and see the general list of things and go, oh, this is something for deleting a page. Okay, yeah, delete the page within the portal. And then sends it to the recycle bin. This is important in terms of the theory behind prompt. It tries to be as comprehensive in its description. It tries to anticipate questions that new users might have. It's not written for someone who's been using DNN all of their life and has been programming, because that really isolates and ostracizes new users, and it makes them intimidated when they're trying to use a new tool. So it tells you it deletes a page and it sends it to the recycle bin. So if you delete a page, it's not gone forever. It's going into the recycle bin. You'll also see certain things like these blocks here where it says pages versus tabs. It actually gives you a description of why you might see the word tab instead of page in some of these cases. So it tries to anticipate some of those questions that might come up. But the most important thing is that you'll see these links here. So if I just click on, let's click on these down here, the see also links. So we've typed in help, but there's also this overview basic syntax and learning prompt commands. This is part of the theory as well. We want to, first of all, click on the overview basic syntax. Now, when I click on it, nothing happened, but something did happen. It actually put this help syntax into our prompt, into our command line. So all we have to do is hit enter, and it will execute that command, and it loads the page for basic syntax. Now, what we're doing here is we're explaining essentially the form of commands within prompt, and they're not much different than what you would see in PowerShell and in other command lines. But especially for those who are new to it, we want to explain a little bit about how it gets set up in terms of, if you have two users, there's going to be a dash. You don't have any spaces between command names or words in a command name. A flag is used to specify options, and then you use two dashes. If you have something that has a value, after that flag, you have the value that you're sending to the parameter. If that value has a space or some other kind of funky character in it that might screw parsing up, and you need to put it in double quotes. So essentially that's what it's saying here in this text. Then there's another link here. It talks about learning prompt commands. And as you can see again, it will type out that command for us. All we have to do is enter, and it will load the next page. And this really goes into the value here is with the command line, it's going to be much more powerful the more commands you know that you have memorized, or the more commands you know how to use. So if you know how to formulate a command, then it makes it easier to remember those commands. So this goes into a lot of detail about really the theory behind how we've named commands and how you put commands together with attributes. So for instance, prompt is typically either a command is either one word or it's two words. If it's one word, it tends to be focused on prompt itself, or what happens in the browser window, or in the prompt command window. So for instance, you might have a command called CLS, for clear screen, that operates within the browser there. It doesn't actually go to the server and do anything. So when you are actually integrating with the server, then you typically have two-word commands, and they are structured in a similar, and hopefully a logical way. It's basically verb and object, or as we say here, it's action and component. But your first word is going to be a verb in terms of what it does, what the command does, and then the second word is going to be what that command operates on. So you would have something like get page, and the verb of get and the object of page. List users, set roles, things like that. So basically verb and object is what we're talking about. And you can see very detailed description of what each of these actions are like. And it goes into some detail because there can be some confusion. For instance, and this is something that I really had to think about when naming things. Did I use the word new? Oops, sorry. Did I use the word new, or do I use the word add? Well, in this case, I explain it for people because new, first of all, is only 3 letters, which is great, but it implies something is actually created. Whereas add is often used in programming as creating something as well, but in reality, it's much more clear if you define add as adding to something. So for instance, we might have new page to create a page, but then, or let's just say new user to create a new user, but then we would have add roles to add a role or roles to a list of roles for that user. Hopefully that makes sense. And and hopefully the descriptions that I put in here make sense as well as people read through it. It also goes through and describes some of the common components that you're going to interact with when you are using prompt. And if you're familiar with DNN, these should be familiar to you: page, task, role, portal, module, things like that. It also makes a distinction that, just like English, unfortunately, this may not work with other languages, but since DNN has been primarily English, the commands are English as well. So when you're operating on one object, it'll be a singular object. But if you're expecting to get multiple objects or operate on multiple objects, then it will be plural. So for instance, you would get a single page, so it would be get page. But if you wanted to get more than one page, one or more pages, then it would be list pages, and we would have the plural of pages. So that makes it, down here is where we see the distinction kind of defined for you there. Okay, so that's the intro help. It's only 3 pages worth. A list of all commands, a list and a short page on how the syntax works, and then a fairly short page that describes the details of the how the words and the command names are structured. Okay, so let's get into some of the things that you can do with
Kelly.
Sure.
Kelly, again, so I have a few questions here, and I'm trying to gauge what is the best time to ask them. So I'm gonna sprinkle them over your presentation. Okay, so even if you're right in the middle, but let me ask you about extensibility. Extensibility, how is it possible? First of all, is it possible to extend this set of commands that is already pre-built into prompt right now? Is it possible or not?
Yes.
as it is. Great. So if I'm a third-party module developer, I can create my own set of commands that you can use with my modules. Is that correct?
Yeah. And again, as a module developer, that was foremost on my mind. I don't like designing something that isn't modifiable later, and especially when you have something that's going to go into the core. You want the whole component, whatever you're building, to be flexible enough to be extended in the future. So yeah, and I won't get into it today, and I'd be happy to come back and do a session on that at a later date. But essentially, I tried to make it as easy to extend as possible. A lot of times, something that is extensible tends to be very complicated to do. But the idea here is there's a simple interface that a programmer would implement. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's like 2 or 3 commands or 2 or 3 functions you would implement. And that's it. You compile it into a DLL, you drop it into the bin folder. You don't have to register it at all. Prompt will automatically detect it and will show it for you. So there's another, let me just, as part of this, there's another command here that is, I don't often use, but if you do list commands, this is kind of a raw list of all the commands that are available to prompt. So when you're doing an extensibility or an extension to it, you type list commands and you'll be able to see it. So you'll see this is a little bit different than the previous list of commands that you saw. It has basically the same information in it, but over here you see a version number and the category that it's in. Also, and I'm not sure if they changed this when they integrated this into the platform. I'd have to research this, but we have, I think, maybe in the name column, when you create an extension, you create a namespace so you don't have name collision. So if I were to create one, I might put no better dot add form or something like that, and it would show the namespace. So all of these commands can coexist peacefully, and all a developer has to do for their modules, all a core developer has to do to extend it for the core, is just create a DLL and drop it into the bin folder. That's it.
Is there a place, and again, you don't need to know that on top of your head. You can provide that if there's a place. Is there a place that has some sort of documentation on how a programmer could go about, a module developer could go about, integrating their modules if they want to make something available via prompt? Is there a place that someone could go?
I don't think that I've written it. David, are you familiar with one?
I just posted a link to a YouTube video of my presentation at DNN Connect on this very subject, and you can go there and learn more about extending prompt in the meantime.
Perfect. And those links will be posted in the show notes. Thank you.
Right, cool. Anything else?
No, that's it for now. I have a few other ones here, but I'll save them for later.
Okay, cool. I actually hope to show something along the lines of that extensibility here towards the end of the session. Okay. So we've gone through essentially the very basics, getting help, and hopefully that will be very simple for you. One thing I do want to show you is that while we have these general descriptions of what these commands are, that's not going to cover it for people who actually want to use this. So you can obviously get help on each command too. You just type in help and the name of the command. So let's just do help list users. Now we have a full help file. It's people have said they really like this the way things are set up in this help file. And I really worked hard to keep it kind of in the command line mode or motif, but still make sure that things stand out to you where they should. So you'll notice some things. First of all, you have the header up here that distinguishes it from the rest of the stuff that might be in the command line from previous commands you might have executed. We have actual tables in here that lay out all of the options for you. And then we also have things like down here, these are sample results of these commands. So there's a very detailed explanations for each of these commands for people, including example commands that they can use to do things. So for instance, with the list users, there are all sorts of things you can do. First of all, you can just type in list users and get a list of users. Well, why don't we do that? There we go. Now we have a list of users. And if we hit, you'll notice at the bottom it says it's page 1 of 2. So if we hit another key, we'll get the second page of that. If we scroll back up, we can see there are all sorts of other things that we can do here. Primarily in terms of finding users. So this list users command is multifaceted, let's say, and allows you to do all sorts of things. For instance, let's find a user by email. So we'll just type in list users. And now we'll type in our flag, which you'll remember is 2 dashes. And we will look for an email. How about, actually, we don't need to put in the dashes yet. So we'll just type in jsmith. Sample.com, see if he's there. Oops. Now, another part of this is it has helpful error messages. As you can see, it says the command that we entered was list user. They didn't find that one. Did I mean list users? Yes, that's what I meant. Thank you so much, prompt. So I'll type that in. List users, jsmith at sample.com. And is that there? Yes, it found this particular user. So you'll notice, whereas before it was listing a bunch of users or a bunch of records, it automatically laid things out into a table format. Now that there's only one record that is displaying, it changes the layout, more of a detailed layout for us. And one of the benefits when we're talking about extensibility, Anderson, is once you don't have to deal with any of this as the developer. You just simply spit out the information that prompt needs, and it will determine if it is a multiple records or a single record, and it will adjust the display accordingly. And as a developer, you can determine, you can tell prompt which fields to use in which layout simply by decorating the function that returns that data. Yes?
Kelly, I have another question here, but this time is from Mike Smelter. I'm going to read that.
Okay.
So the question is, are these commands tied into the same code from a core perspective that might do the same update from the persona bar, or would the code essentially be a duplication between the two places? And I think I got his point. I think that he's asking if, is this leveraging directly the API, or is this duplicating the code that does this job?
It is a good question, and it is using the DNN API. The whole point of this was that I want to provide an interface to whatever is in DNN. So I'm going to directly call the DNN API because that's where all the security is going to happen. Any changes that are made in the future, it will be able to accommodate that. So, good question. Okay, so hopefully I've explained a bit about the extensibility and how that also is easy for developers to do as well. Let's move on to something a bit different. Let's try to look up a user by their username. So list users again. Actually, you know what? I'm lazy. And because I'm a good lazy programmer, I did this. I'm going to hit the up arrow. And we have command history, just like you would on a command line. So what I want is to look for a user. Let's see, I think I saw a Smythe. J Smythe with an E. Let's see if we find anybody there. Yes, we found J Smythe. You'll notice it is looking for the username here. Another thing that we can do, which is great, is we can use wildcards. So we don't have to actually exactly match what we're looking for. Let's just look for, say, list users. And we want to find all of the users who have registered from a particular company, let's say. So we'll use their email domain to find them. So let's do asterisk, which is our wild card. That means match 0 or more characters, asterisk at sample.com. Oh, see, I missed it again, didn't I? So I just up arrowed, Go over there and add an S and hit enter again. And we see we have 2 people that have registered on our site from sample.com. We can, if we want, now we've got this list, we can click on one. Let's just say this one. And you'll notice that, again, nothing happened, but it generated the code dynamically for us so that we now have the command that we need in order to get the details on this particular user. So I'll hit enter, and you can see we have the details for that. If I were to click on this one, you'll notice it says get user 3, which is the user's ID. We can also click on the user's name, and it is giving us the command for that. So as you can see, we could look up a user by their username. It's put it in quotes because it doesn't necessarily know if there are any bad characters there. But we don't, for this particular one, we wouldn't have to have the quotes. We could just delete those and hit enter, and we get the information for that. So built in to the, or tightly integrated into the prompt apparatus, what it does into the prompt code is a way for you to learn how to use prompt 2 without having to memorize everything. So as you see something, just like you would if you're on a regular web page, and you're like, oh boy, that sounds interesting. Yeah, that's the guy I want. You click on it, and while it won't automatically execute it for you because it could be a delete operation, for instance, and you don't want to automatically delete it, you want the user to be able to do that. But the secondary part of this is that it wants you to read the comment or the command and then be able to execute it. So just hit enter each time. Okay, so that's great.
Kelly,
yes.
I'm gonna ask you to pause again. So I have 2 people potentially asking questions here. Let me see if they want to talk by themselves here. Mike, do you want to ask the question directly to Kelly? If you have mic. Mike, if you have mic. Okay, so 1 second. Daniel, you had something there. Do you want to ask that? Or are you okay, Daniel?
No, I'm okay. I was basically commenting on a previous subject that if something changes in the persona bar, but I think logic should not be part of the persona bar. It should be inside of the core APIs. The persona bar would be just a UI like another one. So a change in how it works in the persona bar should not affect prompt because they would both use the DNN API.
Yeah, and remember that this was developed originally distinct from the persona bar. Essentially, we integrated its ability to be called and displayed from the persona bar.
Yeah, so I was just commenting that it would be a mistake to put important logic in the persona bar module. The important logic should be in the DNN API, and whatever module manages it is just a display for it.
Completely agree. Yes.
Hey guys, yeah, I was just wondering from a kind of like a maintenance perspective, just on the same topic that Daniel was just talking about. So like, for example, we have the page manager in the persona bar.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they're from an API perspective, absolutely. There's APIs, I think, like add tab, that type of thing. But from a persona bar page manager perspective, when you add a page, it just doesn't run create the tab. It runs create the tab, put permissions on it, or, you know, other bits and pieces. Just a single API won't call. So just wondering from a maintenance perspective, is that same business logic tied into prompt? So I see lots of changes in GitHub, right? So I'm just curious if someone makes a tweak over to that module and, you know, maybe we create the page a little differently next time. Will that get picked up here, or do we have to make sure we're keeping code changes in both spots?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that prompt is always going to call the DNN API. The other philosophy, I guess, is that I made a decision early on that it will become way too cumbersome for prompt to somehow try to emulate what you see in a UI or what you can do in a UI. So it's really a different perspective. So if you have lots of things that you might be able to set via the UI, like adding permissions, granular permissions with all sorts of different roles that you might add to a particular page, that just might not be feasible to do efficiently while you're typing. especially for this version 1 release of prompt, the goal was to really try to focus on those key things that people do a lot and that are cumbersome to do. So you'll be able to, and I'll show you here in a bit, you'll be able to create a page and you'll be able to set various properties on the page, but you're not gonna be able to set everything on the page. Eventually, as people start to use it and they go, well, I really want this feature, I need to use this feature all the time, then we'll add a flag or a set of flags, or maybe a different command that allows you to do that sort of thing. If that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. So I just wanted to just kind of air that one out there so that one could, I guess, run into a situation where if they create it one way through one persona bar core extension versus another, the outcome could potentially be a little bit different, it sounds like. So that's just a word of caution, I guess.
Yeah, well, what you're going to get if you create a page, you're going to get defaults, whatever the DNN defaults are when you create a page. I'm just saying that we're not adding all of the extra options that you might get from a GUI.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let's move forward a little bit. We were just talking about the wildcard. I also want to look for users that, let's say, that are in a particular role. So first of all, let's see what the roles are. So I'm going to do list roles. Okay, we've got your standard ones, administrator, registered users. I've also created a new one called editors. And I see the role ID is 1001 here. So let's see what users are in. We can see that there are 2 users in the editors role. So why don't I just click on that one and see what it does? All right, so you can see that we can list users and find all the users in that role called editors. I'll just hit enter and we can see who's in there. And then again, we can click on that and see the details for Darlene. Now, there's some other things that I haven't gone into, but are important. I really spent a lot of time thinking about when you execute a command, is there a way that I can minimize keystrokes as much as possible? And I think you've seen some of that. One is that we didn't have to specify a flag for the email when we were looking for a user by email, or when we were looking for a user by their username. It just knew. And essentially what it does behind the scenes is it looks for the existence of the @ symbol. But normally you would type in something like list users email and then J Smith, blah, blah, blah. And there you could get all the users with an email that starts with J Smith. But you'll notice before I just typed in list users J Smith at sample.com. I didn't have to specify the email tag there. So wherever it can judiciously, it will allow you to not have to type kind of a default tag and will make those kinds of intelligent decisions trying to determine what it is, what your intent is. And so those are some of the things that I was experimenting with this version 1, and hopefully we can continue to do more of as we develop prompt further. So, okay, so let's move on to, we've seen a list of users. Let's create a user, shall we? For that, whenever we're creating something new, we're going to use the new keyword. So we'll do new user. Now there's some things that are required by DNN in order to create a user. And those are, let's just do this. Help new user. Always something good to do before you actually execute a command. So in this table, much like you would see in MSDN documentation or much other programmers documentation, you'll see a table with the options here. And what we've done is we've identified those options that are required. Obviously the name of the flag or the option, what the data type is. So most of these are string, but you can see approved and notify are Boolean values or true, false for those who aren't programmers. And then a description, complete description as much as possible as to what that option really is. And again, I got tired of reading documentation where it just essentially was a repetition of whatever the name of the option was. So in any case possible, I tried to not only tell you what that option was, but some of the ramifications for changing certain values in that option. And you'll see that in these descriptions. So this is a look at what we have. We absolutely have these first 4 items are required. So that's what we're going to need to do. We'll type in new user. Anybody got a name? Let's just say we'll do a Olivera. I don't know who that is, but we'll just give them a name. Now I can't do this. Actually, I made a mistake. I need to actually specify the username. And then let's see, what would the email be for this person, which is also required. Let's do Adderson at deskpal.com. And first name will be Adderson. And the last name. I'm hoping I'm spelling your last name right correctly, Adderson.
A little tiny mistake, but that's okay. I can live with that.
Oh, come on. Give me the accurate one. Was it last name is wrong, right?
That's okay. I'm not that picky.
Is it IERA?
OLIVE. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, yeah, good.
No.
Keep going, man. Keep going. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about my feelings. You can hurt my feelings as much as you want.
All right, we'll just do this.
I except after V.
You're going to be Johnson from now on. All right, how's that? All right, so we just created a new user in our site, and it will display what's happening here is it's actually doing a call to the API and bringing back the data that's from the database. So it's not spitting out what you gave it to us, gave to prompt. It's actually pulling that from the database, so you can see that everything was correct. So now we know that Adderson's user ID is 17, and we can even click on that and get the same information back to us. This allows us to work with this particular user account going forward, doing whatever we might need to. For instance, adding a role for him. But before we get that far, let's
Kelly,
also,
let me ask you one thing.
Sure.
This is just a pet peeve of mine. You know, I it's possible, I know, and I would like you to show how you can copy stuff out of prompt to somewhere else, because I think that it's an important use case, in my opinion. You know? So again, if you want to show that part, I know we had some past experiences that I stumbled, you know, and didn't do that properly. So, you know, maybe you want to have a quick peek at that.
Yeah, I remember that conversation. Sure. So, we're kind of struggling a bit with the UI in this particular aspect, in that we want to be able to click on this window in general and get back to the command line. So let's get off of that. So, you know, if I happen to be somewhere else, I've got some other window that has focus. I want to be able to click on here. You'll notice the green arrow down there. When I click on it, I want to be able to have that ready to go so I can start typing immediately, like you would expect in any other window. But when you're dealing with HTML, this is really capturing some DOM events, and it causes a bit of a problem when you're trying to do standard copying like you would expect. So when you want to copy something from this window, you can do it just like you normally would. You'd select it all, but before you let off of your cursor, then hit your copy command. On Mac, it's Command C and then Control C on Windows. And now then let go of your mouse. So now if I pull up a new notepad window here, and then I do paste, you can see that I have that information that I copied. I didn't get the user ID when I copied, I guess. So let's just, oh. There we go. So I'm not letting go yet. Copy. And let's get rid of this. And I'll paste it in. There we go. So that's how you do it. Good.
Awesome.
I know that can be frustrating. And if I'm sure someone's got some workaround for it. We have an awesome community, so I hope that someone will come up with a great option to do that. There are some other opportunities to get data out of this, though, that we'll talk about in a bit. let's see, how are we doing on time? We got what, another half hour? Is that right?
Yes, maximum. Yes. That's
Okay. So let me move forward a little bit more quickly. You've got kind of the gist of how things work. Let me show you some of the other things that can be done. First of all, we have, let's just say, this in Scott person. We want to, they're automatically, when we create a new user, they have their, oh, I see there. They have their authorization set to true, because the assumption is if you're a host and you're creating a new user, you already know that that user exists. And so they are already automatically approved or authorized. So you'll see most of these are true. Previously, I actually went in and had this eDorn user. I set their authorization to false. So if we want to, we say, all right, we've talked to this Eric dude. Let's see what he looks like. We've talked to him, we've conversed by email. We know this person's a real person, this Eric 1, even though no one names their kid that. We say, all right, he's for real. So let's authorize him. We will set, and this is how you set values on pages, users, roles, etc. Anytime you want to change a value on one of these objects, you use the set verb. So we want to operate on the user, so it's going to be set user. And then we need to specify what we actually want to change, and that's going to be the approved value. And we just want to set that to true because it's false now. But I need to specify the ID for this Eric dude. And his ID, as you can see here, is 15. So we'll type in 15 here. Notice I don't have to put a flag for user ID, although I could if I wanted to, but I do have to specify a number there for their ID. I'll hit that. And you can see that the user was updated successfully. What you can't see is that automatically I have a paper cut set up here. So we can see that it automatically sent out an email to this user that we just authorized, much like DNN would do. I could set notification to false so that it wouldn't send the email, but in this case, I have it set to true. So we can see that the user has been authorized. This is a bug that we need to fix, that when a user, it has the label for the authorization or the approval status of the user, but it doesn't display any value there. But if we do this, list users, user ID 15. Oh, sorry. Let's just do eDorn.
Kelly, I'm gonna jump on something that you mentioned there. You said there's a bug there, and of course, there will be bugs. So, and that brings me to how is the maintenance of prompt, and hey, maybe there's even there could be even a roadmap for prompt. And again, I don't want to change the direction of your presentation right now, but I would like to hear a little bit about that. As you mentioned about bugs, I'd like to see how is the maintenance being done for a feature like prompt.
Well, until just a little while ago, the community didn't really have much to do with development of the platform. It was all done by DNN Corp. Since the acquisition by ESW, though, they've been generous in essentially handing the reins of development for the platform over to the community. And as you mentioned earlier, we've now had our first full-fledged release driven by the community. So before, just very recently, there wasn't anything that we could do except maybe submit a pull request or a JIRA ticket and hope that something changes. Now we can actually change it ourselves, submit a pull request to the tag group and have that integrated into the system. I will jump ahead to something that I was going to say later. So once I handed this off to Corp, I didn't have any control over anything beyond that. And as a matter of fact, there were things that they did that weren't in the original code that I gave them in terms of some issues, let's say, or ways of doing things that I don't like from the UX perspective. But I couldn't do anything about that. I had no idea what would happen to prompt in the future. But now I do actually have a say. I was just speaking with members of the tag group, the technology advisory group. And I, along with David and Peter, the people who have been working, and Clint Patterson, people who have worked on the original prompt, we're going to be leading the effort to further develop prompt. So, and of course, we want as many contributors as possible, but we'll be kind of trying to spearhead it and coalesce all the efforts so that we can start developing additional features for prompt, taking care of some of these bugs. And again, this is a bug, but it's really just a display bug. And so going forward, we'll be taking care of that. But as you can see, while it didn't show on the detail here, when you do the list, it actually shows that this user has been authorized. So functionally, it works, just in terms of it's basically a display hiccup that popped up during the integration. So that is enough, I think, for users. We've been able to, let's create a role. Let's see, what were our roles again? So we have editors and there, and users in that role. We have 2 of them. Okay, so let's add this eDorn person with the user ID of 15 to the editor's role. So we're going to do add, not create, because we're going to add a role to this person's list of roles. And that is going to be for the, let's see if I got this right. Let me do a help. And this is plural because it allows you to add more than 1 role at a time. So the first thing is ID, add roles, ID of 15, that was his user ID. And specify the roles. This is going to be editors. So we're specifying the name. We don't have to specify the ID of that. You'll see also that we can make this for a limited amount of time, scheduled amount of time for a particular user, just as you can within the UI. We don't need that. We'll just make it a permanent assignment. So hit enter. And now we can see a list of the roles that we have that, honestly, I don't know why it's listing those. But if we do list of people in that role again, which is here, click on that, hit enter, you can see that we have actually added this Eric Dorn to that role. So everything's working out really well. The demo gods are fairly okay with me. I guess I gave them enough sacrifices that they're happy. Now, there's some other things. We've been spending a lot of time on roles and users. You can also work with pages in much the same way. Do I hear a question coming? Nope, okay. So we can list all the pages in this site. Again, plural pages. And we only have a few pages. I've added a couple here, like page 1, page 1A, page 2. You can, through this user interface, you can add a new page very easily by doing something like new page. We'll just say we're a store that sells cookies. We'll do sugar cookies as the name of the page. And we want the title of the page to be sugar space cookies. And I should probably put title there. And because we're using space, we put it in double quotes. And let's say the URL, we want to be super SEO friendly, so we'll specify the URL. And that will be cookies sugar. And if we hit enter, see the page has been created. Again, another display snafu in that the URL is not displayed here. But if we open up another tab, which I have here, that's not the one. This is the one. So reload. Same site. And we can see that sugar cookies has been created. And if we click on it, you'll see that the sugar cookies is not exactly what we wanted. It worked in my test. I must have done something wrong here. Let's set the page again. We're going to actually set the URL now for this page. So the page ID is 1035. Notice it's tab ID, but that's the same thing in our world. So the ID is 1035, and let's set the URL to cookies sugar again. Let's see if this works. Go over to our other page, go back to home. There it is. Now it says cookies sugar. So we'll have to look into that, see if that was a bug on creation of a page, but you can certainly set the property to the URL after you've created the page. All right, so you can also set multiple properties at the same time. So you could set the title and the URL. You can also set the parent ID of the page. So this allows you to do, as I did before or earlier, you can see page 1 and page 1A. Page 1A is actually a sub page of page 1. And you can see that because the parent ID is 1020. So let's just look at our sugar cookies page here. And let's make that a child of page 1 as well. Right now it is on the upper level, so it's got a parent ID of -1. But if we want to make it a sub-page of page 1, we'll just do set page. And we need the page ID, which is 1035. We'll just set the parent ID to the page that we want it to be a child of, which is 1020, which you see up here for page 1. Okay, it updated successfully. You can also see that the path is updated. Now it's underneath page 1. And its parent ID has been set. So now if we go here and reload the page, sugar cookies menu item has disappeared, and it shows up here underneath page 1. So there are all sorts of things you can do that way to kind of set up your hierarchy as well. You can specify the parent ID when you create the page too, so you don't have to come back. But this allows you to more quickly organize pages, especially if your marketing team says, hey, no, we don't want it there, we want it over here. This is much faster than trying to go into the manage pages and drag and drop to get it onto the right page. Often when I try to do that, I get it into the wrong place, and it takes me several clicks to get it as a member of the right page that I want. So, yeah.
Daniel, do you want to ask that question to Kelly about the URLs?
Yeah, sure. There's an advanced URL management where you can basically set 301 redirects in the UI. Does that exist in the prompt or no?
At this time, no.
No, okay. Would be awesome.
Yeah, well, that is really it's a system level. It can be a system level thing. This is really, if you go to the page, manage pages, and here's sugar cookies. So this is basically setting, where is it? Where did they hide it?
It's in the advanced URLs. So basically, I'm guessing it creates a new one above in SEO. And basically, I think what gets done here is it creates a new one, and that becomes the default. Being able to set the other ones would be awesome.
So it these are things that can be added, but you'll notice it did automatically set that redirect for us.
Yeah, I was just curious because I spend a lot of time there, and this being a prompting would save some time.
Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff that we want to encourage development on. Again, version 1 to make sure we got things stable and have covered, the real basics that we need, that most people need.
Cool.
Okay. Now I am quickly running out of time, so I'm not going to go through all the other stuff that I had. Let me just say that you can move pages around. You can add a module to a page. Let me do something like that real quick. I won't necessarily add the module, but you can get in and look at modules for the site. Let's see, list modules. Okay, and you'll get a list of all the modules. You're going to see all the pages that a particular module has been added to. So if you're sharing a module between pages, you can get at that here. You can add a module to a page simply by saying something like add module, and then you would use the module's name here. And then you specify what the page is that you want to put it on. You can also specify what pane you want to put it into. This is great. You know, say sometimes you screw things up. You put in a module that has bad JS in it, and it just breaks the entire or most of the system, so you can't actually find those little pencils in order to modify the settings on the module. Well, in those cases, you can come to the prompt and you can probably settle out of those things. At the very least, you can move that module over to a different page. There are a lot of things you can do with the module. There are a lot of basic things you can do with the module in terms of that. So just keep that in mind. Let's see if I click on one of these, we get some details about that particular module. That's not good. These are things we'll have to fix too. These are not my fault. I had it working before. So you can get some details about a module. If we do, actually this should be get module 367, page ID. What was that? 26. And now we have some of the details for that. Again, you can see the format is very similar between lists and details for modules and pages and everything else. We can also look at what sites we have in a particular instance, list sites, I mean. And I have two set up here. This is going to be my cookie and cheese store. It's called Cookie Monster with a MU, little play on words. Anybody? All right. Thank you. Charity chuckle, appreciate it. So you can list your pages or the sites that are on this. Eventually, we want to get it so that you can change what site you're working on. But right now, you're only working in the current site that you're logged into.
Quick question.
Sure.
Can you script this? Can you put together multiple commands and then?
Good question. That is not in version 1 of this, but I'm going to get to that question shortly.
Okay.
You can also get information on the host instance itself, which uses the platform information, and it gives you some interesting stuff about the like the default skin that you have set up. So it makes it easy to kind of diagnose some issues. So for instance, if we do get site and the site ID of 1, this is our Cookie Monster site. You can see also what the theme is there, and a lot of the other information you might need for a site, just to get kind of stats on it, number of users and pages, etc. Okay, so I will leave a lot of this up to you guys to investigate. You can do things like delete modules from the page as well. You can delete pages, they go into the recycle bin, and you have a purge command that allows you to permanently delete those. But if you don't want to, you can always restore a page or restore a module as well, just like you can in DNN, because again, it uses the DNN API. Now, I wanted to get to a couple of things really quickly related to extensibility. And one of the reasons I think prompt is so important, and one of the reasons we wanted to make it extensible and have it use Web API, because we want this to really spark the ecosystem. Commercial module vendors can build prompt extensions for their modules to do things, to make changes to their modules site-wide, depending on what it does. Of course, as I said, core can make changes and add commands much more readily than they could by building a full-fledged UI, especially for a lot of things that an admin might want that an ordinary user might not need to use very often. So that can be rolled out much more quickly. But even more important, if you bring in this the JSON Web Tokens authentication, that now opens up the possibility that you can start working and administrating your sites outside of DNN. And that's going to be a huge boon to admins, especially if you're managing multiple sites for your company or for different clients. For instance, Peter Donker spearheaded this, and it's been contributed to by a number of other people. I don't have the list in front of me, but I do want to give them credit for doing this. We have a PowerShell extension that has been created. This gives you a lot of an answer to a lot of the questions that you might have had about version 1 of prompt, like scripting, and then getting data out of prompt. So for instance, I've already gone ahead and set this up. There is a little bit of preparation involved, not bad. Basically, you have a DLL you drop into your into a folder. You do something like import module to point PowerShell to that particular DLL. And once you've done that, you just say, all right, here's my site, here's my username and password for the site, and you're ready to go. You're ready to rock and roll. It uses a JSON web token, and from that point forward, you're ready to work on things. You can even store this information so that you don't have to type it in each time. This hopefully is still hooked up to this data into one site that we've been looking at all day. So let's just type something and see if it works. Yes, so we just typed in list users and we have a list of all the users in the site, much like you saw in prompt itself. You'll notice that the format of this is different because objects are this is actually a PowerShell command that is then interacting with the prompt web API. So prompt is giving objects down to PowerShell, and then PowerShell is spitting that out for you. So if we want a list like we might see in prompt, we would do something like this: list users, and then we would do a pipe. This is what you do with PowerShell for those not familiar. And we would type in something like format table and hit enter. List users, I have to remember. Format table. And there we go. We have something much like you would see in prompt. And Anderson, you should be able to copy this and let off and do your copy and paste so you wouldn't have to worry about it in prompt. There is also the ability to take this list of users, for instance. Peter showed it to me. I wasn't able to get it working in time for the presentation, but you can actually export this information to Excel. So you can pipe this out to an Excel spreadsheet. And what is really interesting, something that Peter demonstrated in, I think it's the DNN Connect conference in Europe, is you can use this to manage your users from an Excel spreadsheet. So what will happen is that you can pull it into an Excel spreadsheet. You can then edit those. Yes, Dave's right. You have to have a JavaScript JSON web token enabled on the site in order for this to work. But anyway, so you can export this to an Excel spreadsheet, edit the Excel spreadsheet, say authorize a user, for instance, or change their email address, and then you can re-import it into, or it automatically will re-import into the website. So you can sync with your Excel spreadsheet. Really fascinating feature. So users who you might have in your organization that don't know command lines from anything, you can have them just edit that information and manage it through an Excel spreadsheet, which is a really cool feature set. But now having this in PowerShell means you can do so much. You can script things out. Now it's not going to be as full featured yet. This is still a work in progress, as is prompt. But you can do scripting to do maintenance, chores. Like I said, you could do this kind of syncing with Excel spreadsheets. Most things that you can do in PowerShell, you can do with this PowerShell extension, which I think is just really awesome. Hats off to Peter and the gang for putting that together. There's one other thing I wanted to show you, and I hope I can do this. Our friend David Poindexter showed this to me. This is just really cool, and hopefully this will work. Nope, that won't work. That's a little too small for everybody, I think. I need to move this over here. Let me, there we go. Okay, so this is a video David gave me. It runs a little fast, but what I want to explain, it's kind of like what you just saw in PowerShell, but this is on your phone. You can manage your website, the basics of managing your website through your phone. So you can be out and about and you can do stuff. So if someone calls and says, hey, I locked myself out, you can fix that for them while you're eating dinner or something like that, which is really cool. So you'll notice at the bottom, you have a button for your DNN sites. You can store a list of your sites and the authentication. Again, it works with JWT as well. And of course, you can list the commands. And you will see as part of this video, kind of a scrolling of the commands, same commands you would see in prompt. And I'm trying to remember now. Well, we'll just watch it. He's going to execute a command or two in this. It goes kind of fast. It's only about 30 seconds. So here we go. Make sure you're watching. Here we go. Much as you would see in prompt, you can see the sites that he's added. He's creating a new site now in order to manage that. Typing in his login information, password.
This is the safest way to demo something, you know.
Yes, it is. And so you can organize them. And I think he's going to do a command here shortly. Yeah, so he's going to clear the event log. This is something I didn't show you. This is one of the system properties or system commands. So you know how that event log can get really packed. This is actually, as I recall, David, didn't you write this command to clear the event log?
Yes.
So big kudos to David for that. And this is live, or not live, but it was live when he recorded it. It's actually interacting with a real website. And has cleared the event log. So any of those other commands, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, but all those other commands operate as well, or most of them?
For the most part, there are some challenges just due to the new portal ID being now required, because that was part of the problem with this and why it wasn't launched initially, is because there was no context for the portal that you were in. So you're authenticating against DNN, but not a specific portal ID. So some of the commands were problematic out of context of prompt, inside DNN.
Right. So this is just a glimpse as to what might be coming down the road for DNN via prompt. So you may never have to touch prompt within the user interface. You could just be using PowerShell to script things, and PowerShell is available on the Mac and Linux as well now. So it might be possible for you to do that on the Mac and never have a Windows machine even, or from your mobile phone.
Great. Kelly.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question? Okay. So just a quick story. Back 2017, during the DNN Summit, someone invited me to let's put it this way, a private viewing of prompt, So I want to know from you your vision back then, this was what, a year and a half ago, more or less, to where it is now. How different or how close or how much better or how much worse, hopefully not, are things from that point compared to where it is right now?
What you see within DNN, within that user interface, is pretty close to what I had envisioned. It's not as full featured. It doesn't have every command that I want. But yeah, what I was striving for was really good user experience, especially for those who might be intimidated by a command line. And so there are a lot of these touches within the help file with very detailed help topics that I hope will help people over the hump and start using it, because once we really get into it, people are going to start using it all the time. There are some things that I want to add to it. I would like to be able to add piping like you see in PowerShell. I would like to be able to add scripting like you see, or like you'll be able to in PowerShell. Now that might not be necessary if we have a full-fledged PowerShell extension, and we might just keep it limited within DNN and let the tools that are better or have better advantage at those types of tasks, let those handle those tasks. But in general, yeah, it's pretty close, I think. There's one other thing that I want to have happen that isn't in this yet, and this was part of the original vision. And that is to kind of mimic what we have in Node, NPM. So I have a domain called DNN NPM to host this, hopefully when we get to it. I want to be able to install modules through the command line. Wouldn't it be great? So a little plug for Xmod Pro. Let's just say you want to install Xmod Pro on a site, type in DNN NPM Xmod Pro, and boom, it happens. It goes out to the internet, wherever it is, pulls in the files and installs it for you. From a logistical standpoint, there's not too many hurdles to overcome there, just kind of at a higher level. We are just talking about kind of tying into the DNN, or we'll probably have to modify the DNN installation routine a little bit, but conceptually, I think it can work fairly easily. And this opens up all sorts of possibilities. David and I have talked with Peter. There's this concept of establishing recipes. So you could install a DNN site and then execute a recipe that would install multiple modules. So if you want to create a blog site, for instance, it would go out and get all the modules you might want on a blog site, including the blog module, maybe some banner modules or whatever else might be out there. Different organizations can create their own recipes. Companies can create their own recipes, so they can spin up sites real quickly for clients if they want. The possibilities really are endless here, and it puts DNN smack dab at the forefront of what's happening in front-end development and back-end development. So I think this positions DNN really well to attract more developers and to attract more people to the ecosystem when we can get all of this put together. This is the start. This is really the nugget, I guess. I've lost my metaphors, but you understand. This is really kind of the starting point for where we go.
So, talking about metaphors, let me ask this question: How does it feel for you to have parented a full-fledged feature on DNN? Because it's very rare. I mean, DNN is built by contributions and people, working, contributing codes. And as you can see here, we have lots of parents here. We have David, we have Peter. But again, let's put it this way, you give birth to this. So how does it feel like?
It hurt.
It hurts? Okay.
It's a really big baby. No.
Okay.
No, it feels great. I love it. And to be perfectly honest, since I'm a commercial module developer, my initial instinct was to release this as a commercial module or a commercial tool of some sort. And I started working through how I could do it. But as I talked to Peter, he helped me to see that, well, probably the best approach, it needs to be in the platform. It needs to be on everybody's site in order to be truly effective. So Peter helped kind of shepherd me into the community part of this, and it's been a big help in terms of getting it into the platform too.
So we have to thank Peter for having this, on the platform. Anyway, just a side note.
Yes, his head will get really big now.
I get it. Okay, so let me ask last question here. Hopefully, not true. Let's talk about usage. How do you track usage of a feature like that to know that, hey, you know what, now we should be improving X, Y, and Z? I mean, is that based on feedback? Is that based on... how do you track that? How do you... Is that a survey that you send out and you ask questions? I mean, how do you track usage? How do you track what's next?
It's kind of the same question that everybody runs into. How do you track usage? We don't want to be the people that spy on you. I mean, we don't want to be a Google that's tracking your every movement. We would love to have that information, but I don't think as a platform we want to be able to do that. So without that kind of information, it becomes hard to track who's using it, how they're using it. How we do it, I'm not sure. I think part of the way we can see how many people are using it is how many people start talking about it. How many people start submitting pull requests, start complaining that there are bugs, and giving us ideas for things that they would like to do with it. And hopefully this session will prompt some ideas, pun intended, on other people's part on how they might be able to envision how they could use prompt on a daily basis and things that we could do to add on to prompt. We're really starting to garner that group that's going to help shepherd prompt forward. So we'll be looking for people to join us and also people to give us feedback on all this stuff.
Awesome. Guys, I want to know if anybody else has any questions for Kelly. I'm gonna give you 1, give you 2, 3.
There is no keyboard shortcut to open prompt. That's not something. Yeah, that would be something nice.
I have a list. So initially, when I had it before we made it a persona bar, it was like you get in Visual Studio. It was Control backtick, and ideally, I would like to get to that point again. So from wherever you are, some keyboard shortcut that allows you to open it up. So yes, you're right on. That's exactly where I'm thinking too.
Kelly, anything else before we close?
Just that I'm honored to have been invited to speak here. I really appreciate the warm welcome you guys all gave me and the great questions. I'm really happy to have donated Prompt. But it's not all about me. It's really about the community and how the community can build up this platform to be great again, make DNN great again, so to speak. So I hope that you will jump into the fray and help us. If you can't program, help us with ideas. Just start using it and give us feedback on it. But if you can develop, really would like your help.
Awesome. With that, again, thank you very much, Kelly. I'll just take over the presentation so I can wrap things up here and we will be done. Let me see here if I can get that myself. Okay, make presenter. And let's share this. Perfect. Okay, so again, Kelly, thank you so much for taking the time, doing the demo, going through our questions. I mean, really appreciate. And again, we're keep looking forward to your how prompts will get more and more adopted. And unfortunately, I don't have too many DNN9 sites that we take care of, so I haven't been too much on the feature, but
this is a great reason to upgrade.
What is that?
A great reason to upgrade.
I get it, and you know what? After the last survey that was done during the virtual user group, people are embracing DNN9, and you know what? I should push my clients to embrace DNN9 as well. Anyway, again, awesome having you. I've asked already if there were questions or crickets, and I think that we had one question. Then you think for that. I think that with that, we wrap things up here. And I think that we already have a guest for our next meeting on November, but I'll confirm and I will let you guys know. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for participating. Again, it's always good to see the known faces, the new faces. And Kelly, again, thank you very much. Appreciate all of you being around. It's 8:08 and we are done today. I'll talk to you again November. Have a great October. Cheers. Bye.